right, so this is going to be probably our most authentic, not just filler podcast. We're sitting out here in a farm field with Kris Wardin, who's got a dairy farm here in St. John's, Michigan. And I'm just going to have Kris tell a little bit about the dairy industry, what he does. He does work for MMPA also. You serve on the board?
That's correct.
Serves on the board at MMPA. And so this is going to be amazing shoot. We've got some cows in the background. We got a beautiful mid-Michigan day. So maybe just, Kris, tell us a little bit about how you got here to have a farm in St. John's, where you're from, and maybe just a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah, again, my name's Kris Wardin. My wife Carla and I own and operate this farm. We've been here now 13 years. We're the 6th generation to farm in this land in St. John's. I myself grew up just up the road in Hemlock, Michigan, on a dairy farm as well. So we both come from dairy farming families, and we both went to college and didn't think we were going to be dairy farmers, and worked in the corporate world for 7 years, and then decided that maybe the farm was a better place to be and raise a family, and we definitely have not regretted that decision.
So you lived out east, is that right?
We did, yeah.
And then you decided to move back and raise your kids and have dairy cattle.
That's exactly right.
Okay, and how many cattle do you have?
Yeah, we're milking about 450 cows here. We have all the young stock here at the farm as well. So we have almost 1,000 animals in total here. And then we raise the feed for them on about 900 acres of land. That some of it's cropped, and some of it, like you see behind us, is pasture where they serve themselves.
And what do they do with your milk after it's milked?
Sure. As you mentioned before, we belong to Michigan Milk Producers, which is a dairy co-op, where we, the farmers, are the owners of the company, but they hire the experts to market our milk. So we do what we do best, which is produce the milk, and our hired employees and partners then market and sell that milk. So all of our milk predominantly goes just up the road to Ovid, where they make it into butter and cream and milk powders, both for local sale and to ship all over the country.
So, and there's a reason we're out here, not just because Kris is amazing, not just because dairy industry is important, but during COVID, I mean, there was a time there where we kind of went back to basics, right? And we were talking about, what do? You take care of your family, you take care of your safety, your physical health, and you feed your family. And I think there was really a reaction to thanking farmers for their work, because, there was no stop in farm world.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you have any reaction to farming looking different in COVID times.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think you're right. We struggle to find the positive in something so horrible as COVID situation. But if that was one of the positives, for sure, is that people really appreciated what farmers were doing. It's the first time in a lot of people's lifetime they went to the grocery store and couldn't just buy what they wanted.
Yeah.
And so really it drove people to want to know more and ultimately to appreciate what we as farmers were doing. As far as what it changed for us as farmers, on one hand, it was easy to just shut out the outside world and go to work, because we were doing the same things we always did every day.
Sure.
But from a product sales and marketing standpoint, half of butter and cheese and some of the dairy products go through restaurants and food service channels, and those shut down.
And that was
just flatlined. And so there was a huge drop off in demand. The products started piling up. And then at the grocery store, we actually saw an uptick in some of the products that people consume at home. So fluid milk actually went up a little bit. Cheese in consumable sizes went up, but you're trying to displace these bulk sizes that restaurants and food service and hotels were using, and it wasn't a one-for-one, unfortunately. So our demand definitely went down, but the profile changed of what dairy products were moving. So it was a little bit up, more down, but it really ultimately changed the way we were selling the product.
Tell me about, so if you don't know, there's a gigantic cheese plant being built in the 93rd district, right in St. John's, Michigan, probably 8 miles from where we're standing or even closer. And that's going to make a big impact, I think, in the dairy industry. But just tell me about the cheese plant, some background on that. I think people would love to hear about that from the farmer's view.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. I mean, this is one of the largest cheese plants, or will be, in the United States. They're going to take in about 8 million pounds of milk a day, and then about 800,000 pounds of cheese will roll out the back door, along with ProLiant, which is another company that's involved in that, takes the whey product, which is the byproduct of the cheese, and makes pharmaceutical grade products from that. So it really is a very modern plant. It's a very large plant, and for the local economy, it's great. It creates jobs. It's really a great thing. The housing market's been kind of crazy around here lately, as you know. And for the farmers specifically, Michigan's a great place to produce milk. And so our farmers have produced more and more milk, and the processing hasn't necessarily kept up with it. So this is sort of catching us up with the processing ability, so we don't have to move as much of that milk out of state. Transportation costs are less, and it's just better when things can be utilized closer to home.
Yeah, I would say if you combine Clinton and Gratiot, and this is something you talked about earlier, it's probably the #1 dairy producing area in the state if you combine those two counties.
That's definitely right. There's definitely pockets of milk production, but Clinton and Gratiot combined are definitely the largest area. The Thumb produces a lot of milk. You got some pockets on the west side, up north by McBain, but Clinton and Gratiot, infrastructure-wise as well, right in the middle of the state, right by a lot of the major intersections and interstates, and that was part of the thinking behind the cheese plant going to St. John.
Yeah, I did the tour, and they used the term 6-foot roving pallets of cheese, and I said, that sounds okay to me.
It's pretty amazing.
Tell me a little bit about a typical day for you and a dairy farmer, if you would, like today.
Sure.
Tell us about your day, what you're working on here.
Sure. So we actually milk 3 times a day here, which is fairly common now in today's dairy world. It's usually 3 or 2 times a day milking. So we start our morning milking at 4 o'clock in the morning, and that takes about 6 hours or so to milk.
Are you doing that milking? You have people who do that milking for you.
That is correct. I mean, I do milk from time to time, but not every day. We have 10 great employees that help us full time. And then we have some seasonal help, including my 3 young boys that are definitely on the crew this year.
That's exciting that they're on the crew now.
It's about time. They paid a little bit of the rent back, you know. But, yeah, so 10 full-time employees. We have 2 in the parlor, 1 bringing up the cows and cleaning the barns. And then 1 person starts at 4 as well, feeding all the cows. We feed twice a day. We milk 3 times a day. And then there's all the cropping, the mechanic work, the herd health work. We do a lot with just checking cows and making sure they're healthy, helping them have babies. There's calves being born every day. Calf feeding is its own job, so there's no shortage of work on the dairy farm.
Yeah, I come out here and I find myself so impressed with the scope of the operation and all that goes into it. This is not just going to a computer and typing, right? This is everything.
There's a lot to it. It's a lot of work, but it's also a lot of fun.
And if the #1 thing that comes out of it is, out of the negative of COVID, is that people appreciate, this is the work that farmers do. They can't stop. They can't be shut down. They have to go because we have to feed people.
Yep.
Okay, absolutely. We'll take some positive out of this really difficult situation.
Absolutely. And I think most farmers do not want too much credit. They do what they do because they love it. But the reality is people do need to know where their food comes from. And there's been more of a trend back toward that. People just are more removed from the farm, so they want to know more about where it comes from. But this COVID situation really forced the issue and really took it up a notch, in my opinion.
Tell me a little bit about some of these CAFO rules that Deagle here in Michigan worked on, and the farmers pushed back a little, said they were not appropriate. And just tell me a little bit about your background with them, because I know you're very educated on the process.
Sure. And CAFO would be a large animal feeding operation, and they sort of have their own rules about environmental things and some management issues, and that's been that way for a long time. But every 5 years, that process gets renewed. It gets looked at. There's a public process to review it. And this year, they kind of really got aggressive with the changes, or the proposed changes. And so we in agriculture, and I think specifically in dairy, we're not opposed to regulation. We just want it to be fair. We want it to be science-based. We want it to be reasonable. And that's where we really pushed back this time, is I think a lot of it wasn't as science-based as we thought it should be. We also would like some acknowledgement for the MEAT program, which is a voluntary environmental program.
And the MEAT program has been very popular, and I know
popular with the farmers. Yep. And I think a good acknowledgement from regulatory and the public that it is a good step to really verify what we're doing environmentally. And this CAFO proposed permit didn't really give a lot of nod to all the work and the progress that's been done under the MEAT program. So
yeah, I know I pushed back against the CAFO rules, and a lot of people in the House of Representatives pushed back. We do want it to be science-based. We know you can't overburden farmers because they do completely essential, not to steal from a word that's been controversial, but completely important work to just continuing. And so there was a pullback on some of those rules, and I know we will continue conversations with Deagle, because we do have to support the farmers and the farms going forward. We just do. And so is there anything else that maybe people watching would like to hear about your dairy farm or the dairy industry going forward? Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think really the biggest thing to me that people always ask me about is how the prices and how are things going. Well, that is a world we live in today. It's more volatile than it ever has been. And I think that's another thing that we live in a world now where like 1 out of 7 days of the week, the amount of dairy products for one day gets exported. So we're hugely reliant on not only providing food for this country, but also exporting it to other countries. But the world economy is so much more volatile even than the U.S. economy. And so we've gotten used to a little bit the up and downs of the prices. But this COVID thing really threw everybody for a loop. All that product that went through the restaurants tanked the price almost overnight. And so we went through some of the lowest milk prices we ever had in April and May of this year. But then the USDA stepped in and did something really good in that they saw a need at the food banks, and they saw a need to try to help the farmers. And so they put together this CFAP program that really has had the intended effect on the farmer side of raising the prices. And I think it's been hugely important and successful through the food banks as well. So in terms of current events, what's going on in dairy, I think the farmers are tremendously thankful for that program. Really helped rebound something that looked like a really bad price situation this year, but also the realization that the food banks are in an unprecedented situation as well. And the food is here. We're producing it every day. It just maybe wasn't in the right package or didn't have the right channels to get where it needed to be. And so that's a great example of a partnership between the industry and government that really, really worked and had the intended consequence.
Yeah, I get excited when I hear about a government program that intended to do something and then it actually happened. And then I'm sitting in this field hearing, a farmer say, look, government tried something and it worked. And so I get excited over that. So
sure.
Well, that's the Not Just Filler podcast. Special guest Kris Wardin. We're out in his farm field, and you know what? This is just a perfect mid-Michigan day, and so thank you for watching. I'm going to put his farm. If you ever want to come out here, I'll bet he'll show you around.
Absolutely.
And I know his family is an awesome St. John's family too. So thanks for watching, Kris. I appreciate you very much.
Hey, thanks for having me on.